Hey, friends, welcome back to Tea and Takeaway, a therapist point of view. This episode, 28 minutes. What was this? It's the end. We all want more. And all we got was 28 minutes. I had to really sit in my feelings for a moment before I got to writing my notes for this episode because I have thoughts. So, for second to last time, I'll start with the lightest and end with the heaviest, and we'll wrap it all up with the bow as we end with Carrie. Let's break it all down with a little tea and a lot of therapist takeaways. Okay, let's start with this. Adam calling Thanksgiving next Thursday. That was actually, though, really telling. On the surface, it was casual and even a little nonchalant. But from a therapist point of view, it was emotionally healthy because, sure, we know that Adam is a little granola, but him just saying next Thursday shows that he isn't putting the weight of expectations or making this moment very formal as Seema meets his sister. He's just inviting Seema into his world, kind of like a no pressure, no strings, just allowing the time for presence. It reminds us all that gratitude doesn't need to be saved for the holidays. We can practice it every single day, whether it's big things like a supportive partner or small things like a warm cup of coffee in the moment or the stillness before the house wakes up. Gratitude is part of my mindful living framework for a reason, because even 30 seconds of mindful appreciation can shift your whole mindset and really set your trajectory out for the day on a much positive note. And listen, Adam is all in because he says, I love you first. He's showing up fully, emotionally, physically, all the things. And you can even see it in the way that he looks at her. And yet, here Seema is still resisting. Sure, she's cracking jokes, and it's awesome to see her kind of with her hair down, quite literally, but she's also avoiding the moment to a degree. Even Carrie calls it out when she says, are you determined to make this lovely invite a bad thing? And that's the pattern here, right? Seema's still operating from that place of, what if this doesn't work? Her guard is high. She's turning softness into suspicion to a degree. And we know, as we've talked about, that's not uncommon when you've built your life on independence, when you've been hurt perhaps in the past, or when vulnerability feels like danger in sense of intimacy. But the takeaway here is that Seema's defense mechanisms continuously show up in this relationship. And let's be honest, they have served her to a point. They've protected her, they've kept her safe. But when a coping skill becomes a permanent lifestyle, it doesn't just keep the bad out, it also keeps the good out too. At some point, we really have to ask ourselves, is this wall protecting me or is it now isolating me? Am I avoiding pain or am I also avoiding love in the process? When someone is showing up the way that Adam is, it may be time to lay down the armor, Seema, even if just a little. Because if we keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, then we'll never be able to fully enjoy the grounds that we're standing on in the right here and right now. Seema's story is a reminder that love isn't always dramatic or explosive. Sometimes it's in these soft ways, patient, unassuming, but very present. And that matters just as much. So let me know, is Seema overthinking things or is her hesitation a sign that she's just not into Adam? I think she's into him, but I think that she needs to get herself together. Someone else who's also working on defense mechanisms is Anthony. Proposal at Bergdorf's, Giuseppe's in love. It's so sweet to see. But then we get a peek from behind the scenes when Anthony confesses to Carrie, I don't know if he wants me to marry him or mommy him. And that line says a lot because on one level, it's classic case of cold feet, right? It can seem that way, which is completely normal when facing a big next step of life. But for Anthony, I wonder if it's not just nerves. It's a deeper question about what his marriage would look like and who he's expected to be within it. We've seen how different Anthony and Giuseppe are, not just in age, but also in the way that they navigate life. Giuseppe is very much more quiet and introspective, and Anthony is very outspoken. So when he's faced with this proposal that feels like more of a merger than a mutual step forward, it's not surprising that he'd pause. Also, Anthony has built a life on his terms, his business, his independence, his attitude. It's all part of this armor. The idea of stepping into a role where he's more of a caregiver or more of an emotional anchor than an equal partner can, of course, understandably give him pause. I don't think he's asking, do I love him? I think what he's really wondering about is, will I still recognize myself in this relationship? So the takeaway here is that second thoughts before a big life decision like marriage is much more common than we ever talk about. It doesn't always mean that you're with the wrong person. Sometimes it means that you're finally slowing down long enough to hear your own thoughts and maybe your own fears. And for Anthony, again, it's layered. The age gap, the dynamics of caregiver versus partnership, they're all very real concerns. It's one thing to feel loved, but it's really another to truly feel like an equal. And when those roles start to blur a little, especially in relationships with different levels of life experience or even emotional development, it's normal to question what's being asked of you. But here's the key: doubts aren't always a red flag. They can just be an invitation to reflect, to ask ourselves questions, and get clear on what we actually want before saying yes to something forever. So tell me, do you think that Anthony should jump and get married right now, or do you think that he should pump the brakes a little? I truly hope for both of them that it does work out. In another relationship, Lisa's and Herbert's, we see things crumbling a little, at least for the moment. We're seeing the aftermath of Herbert losing the race for comptroller. We've seen some insecurities before, but we've never quite seen him to this degree. He's always shown up with confidence, with charisma, with this Wexley's win type of energy. But now this is a complete departure of how we've known to see Herbert. And of course, public failure hits differently. I can't even imagine what a celebrity really feels like when they go through a breakup, let's say. This compares to this because it's one thing to do life in private, to lose in private. But when you're a public figure, the loss isn't personal anymore. You're now sharing it with the world and you don't choose to disappear from it, at least not completely. But for Herbert here, because he has had this mindset of Wexley's win his entire life, it seems like losing feels like not just a loss, but a character flaw, not just a temporary setback, but something that defines him. And that, my friends, is a problem. The takeaway here is that Herbert's reaction shows us what happens when we tie our worth to our wins. And while that can create a drive for success, it also makes us incredibly fragile, believe it or not, when things don't go our way. He tells Lisa, I failed. I failed you. I failed my family. I failed badly. And that's just a lot of pressure to put on yourself out of a single outcome that it's determined by other people's votes. And honestly, it is a mindset that we need to watch, not just for ourselves as adults, but also for our kids. And when we are acting this way around our kids, because when the narrative at home is this Wexley's wins, it has an unspoken message of failure isn't an option, right? And even the mom said in the last episode, why would you even run it if it wasn't a guarantee that you weren't going to win? And that kind of thinking leads to a fixed mindset where our value is tied to achievement and perfection over growth and effort. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying that we should just hand out trophies for just showing up, right? I'm not of that mentality. When we only praise the A plus or when we only praise the win of the championship trophy, we forget to value the journey, the practice, the courage to try something new or try something hard, the ability to lose, reflect, and get back up again. We can't raise our kids with just this winning mentality. And it seems that Herbert was raised in that way. And now, when he did not win, he doesn't know what to do with himself because he hasn't had this experience. Herbert really deserved a moment to grieve, absolutely. But eventually, we do have to get ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and try it again, or pivot to something else. And not because we're over it, but because we have to understand that we are more than our mistakes. And the real win is knowing that it's okay to try something and to lose without losing ourself or our self worth. So the next time you or your child doesn't make the team or doesn't make the promotion, ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this moment? Is it one of shame if I don't get it? Or is it one of trying something new, learning something new, resilience, and persevering on? So, do you think that Herbert was being too dramatic about his loss, or was his reaction totally valid? Let me know what you think in the comments. Then we're going to move on to Miranda. She means well, but sometimes her help creates more chaos than it does actually help. We've seen that she's invited Brady's baby mama to Thanksgiving without telling him. It's like she doesn't learn. Even a few episodes ago, we saw her not share the issue with alcohol with Joy, and then we saw that she needed to and that she should have done it earlier. And here she is with a new issue, but with the same pattern. And sure, yes, it's sweet that she wants to include Mia. And last time we talked about getting to know her and what that means for her role as a grandmother. And we can say that the thought is nice to invite Mia into their family. But the thing is that Brady needs to be part of this decision because Brady is no longer a 7-year-old boy. Brady is an adult that is dealing with a situation that, as an adult, he has to be the one to make these decisions, not his mom. And we very clearly see how he felt about this all. And he even tells Miranda to uninvite her. But Miranda thinks that that's an out of this world request to do. As if Thanksgiving wasn't stressful enough without unexpected guests and baby mama drama, right? And in this heated exchange, we see Miranda trying her best to hold it together. She even says, listen, this is happening. The baby Thanksgiving, let's make the best of it. Very lawyer like, of course. But what I wish would happen is that I wish I had Miranda at a mom coaching session and can help her understand Brady has to have his own experience. As much as she's trying to be helpful, this is not about her life. She's like an accessory in this part of life. She is not the main character. Brady is. And while it's great that she wants to get to know Mia, Brady's the one having the baby, not Miranda. And interestingly, in the midst of this all is Joy sitting there taking it all in. And I do think that Joy played her part. She stayed there quietly because she's still very new in this relationship. And how awkward would it have been if she would have taken a choice on either Brady's side or Miranda's side? So the takeaway in this is that Miranda, yet again, is trying so hard to be the good mom, the supportive parent, the open minded adult in a very grown up situation. But as I've shared with you before, being a good parent also means stepping back and letting your child take the lead, especially when it comes to their relationships. As he's transitioning into adulthood, I mean, he's about to be a dad. And even though it may be tempting to steer the ship for him, Miranda's job right now is to let him figure out how to co parent, how to make decisions, how to even make mistakes. If that's the direction that he even wants to go in, because he may not want to co parent at all. And like we said last week, the shift in parenting is so hard because our instincts is always to protect our kids, and that never really goes away. But we must allow our kids to live, to make good choices, poor choices, mistakes, and all. And on a deeper level, Miranda still hasn't fully adjusted to this next chapter of motherhood, which would be becoming a grandmother. She's trying to build bridges. She's trying to keep everybody happy and not feel left behind, but she has to take a beat because this is all new for everybody and for her too. So tell me in the comments, would you want your mom inviting your ex or your baby's other parent to Thanksgiving without telling you? And how would that actually go for Thanksgiving? So that's one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have Charlotte. There were so many layers this week to Charlotte's storyline. And I really appreciate Harry's characters. His one-liners are so funny and he's so, so sweet. And that whole situation with Harry not wanting to go to Miranda's house for Thanksgiving and instead wanting to be at home with his family, at first glance, we could think, come on, Harry, suck it up. You're making more work for Charlotte. It's just a couple of hours. You'll get over it. However, if you've ever been the person going through a hard health battle or the immediate person right next to them really supporting them, you may be familiar with the thought that when we think of life in life or death terms, you do negotiate with the world. And once he broke it down for Charlotte, that really all he wanted to make sure was to make it to Thanksgiving, it was really sweet that she was able to truly see him and respect his wishes. So I hope that we can all learn a lot from that situation. And then Charlotte, in respect to her kids, just wanted to pull Charlotte through the screen and give her a big hug because it was a big deal. But first, I've shared that the actress Alexa, who plays Rock, she was my student when I was a school counselor, and she's so very sweet and she truly is that talented. But back to Charlotte, when she sees Rock in the dress, I mean, the scene was so quick, and that really is how fast our kids grow up right before our eyes. It just snaps and then it's gone. But the scene wasn't just about a mom seeing her kid dressed up. It really was a mom seeing her kid dressed up in a role that she'd already grieved and put away. I don't know how well she processed when Rock said that their pronouns are they, them, but she did put that box away, so to speak. And I'll tell you that as a therapist, I've worked with many families navigating similar moments. And for us as parents, we picture our kids in their life moments long before they even come out of the womb. I'll share with you that when I was pregnant with both of my kids, I pictured dancing with my son at his wedding, him wearing a tux, getting married to a woman in a white dress. And with my daughter, I've pictured her standing in a white dress, getting married next to a man. And the reasons why these images are the ones that I've pictured, and maybe you have too, is because in the society we live in, that's what we're raised with. Those are the images that we see. But also, it's because that's the path that I took for my life. But what we have to think of as parents is what if our kids don't choose that same path or even want to get married at all? And when that happens, our kids are popping our bubbles, our dreams for them. When really, just like we said about Miranda, we need to allow our kids to live out their own dreams because we've already lived out ours. It's really hard, not because we don't love them, but because we need to unlearn the stories that we've carried about them. And it doesn't mean that we stop loving them, it just means that we meet them where they're at. And when we see Charlotte delete that photo of Rock at the end, it was a very quiet scene, but it was quite powerful. We can interpret it in more ways than one because maybe it was her saying, okay, I'm letting this go, or this brings me pain to see my kid different than where they are now. I've worked with many families whose children have transitioned, and they do keep pictures for themselves of their child before the transition. Maybe not up in their living room for all to see, but just for themselves, because that is the vision and appreciation of the child that we once had, as we can still have and accept this new vision and appreciation of who your child is now. So, the takeaway here is that Charlotte reminds us that parenting is a lifelong practice of releasing control, releasing expectations, and releasing the dreams we've had for our kids so that they can live out their own dreams, not the ones that we wrote for them, but the ones that they write for themselves. This is one of the most tender, complicated, and beautiful parts of motherhood. And it's okay to have feelings about it. It's okay to grieve quietly. It's okay to feel proud and sad and unsure all at the same time. Real growth comes when we make space for our kids to lead, even if it means that we're rewriting our roles as we go along for the ride. And then switching gears completely to Miss Carrie Bradshaw. This entire episode for Carrie was her going down through memory lane and being filled with nostalgia. It reminded me of when I visit my college campus for homecoming and alumni reunion weekend. You walk through these places, remembering glimpses of 20 some years ago, and you even walk down the same pathways and hallways that you did back then. But the reality is that you are not the same, nor should you be, because you've had a life of experience that has molded you and shaped you to the person you become today. Do you really want to be the same as you were 20, 30 years ago? Carrie said it best when she said, part of me still lives here. And yeah, that is true because we do leave pieces of ourselves behind in homes and relationships in different seasons of life. But what we hope is that as we leave these pieces behind, that we go through a metamorphosis into the new version of ourselves. The difference here, though, is that there seems to be an element of feeling stuck and of feeling unfulfilled in Carrie. And when we look at her from the outside looking in, she looks amazing, right? I mean, literally, her outfit, she looks so grown up, very mature, not just in age, but in presence. But there seemed to be an element of joy missing from her throughout the entire episode. We saw it in almost all the scenes. The scene with her editor, where she says it's a tragedy that the character ends up alone. And the scene with Seema, when Carrie admits that the house is too big for her and she finally lets herself say it out loud. When she's in the scene with Charlotte and Miranda, Charlotte says that she's glad that it finally feels warm and cozy because she was concerned that the house was feeling so big and empty for a while. And then when Lisette asks, doesn't it scare you being in that big house all alone? Carrie responds with, I'm more scared of what's already happened to me. And I wonder what she means by this. Is she just talking about the house? I don't think so. Is she talking about her husband dying, her losing a second love, her ending up alone? It's very convoluted. And we can't dismiss the line when she's talking to Seema and she says that she's been harboring the thought that Duncan would come back. And now we see that he isn't coming back. And is that thought the one that's putting the nail in the coffin, so to speak, that here she is alone yet again, older and alone? And if I may, I was really hoping that she wasn't caught up in her feelings about Duncan. I wasn't thrilled about the fact that they hooked up, although the fairy tale ending is always nice to hang on to. But being that they did hook up, I was then hoping that Carrie would treat it as a guy would treat it, appreciating the moment for what it was and moving forward. But now we see that she definitely had feelings there. And so we're left with a very important question. Is ending up alone truly a tragedy? Was it a tragedy in 1846, as the editor asked? I mean, watching Cynthia Nixon's character on The Gilded Age now, it seems like it was. But in today's age, is it still a tragedy? My friends, we may not want to admit it to be, but I do believe that the majority of society does picture it as so. Since utero, it seems, we've read enough stories and watched enough Disney movies to know it always ends with, and they lived happily ever after. We're literally conditioned to think that without a partner, the story is not complete. And now even Carrie's story faces the same criticism. And even for the show, which we know since last week, it's officially coming to an end next week. But do we need a happy ending from the series as well? And what does happy technically look like? Or can happiness look like Elsa's version of Happily Ever After in Frozen, where she doesn't end up with a guy, but is finally comfortable in her own skin with the life she leads? So the takeaway here is that Carrie's story in this episode quietly raises a deeply human question. Can we be happy without the happily ever after that we were all taught to want? From fairy tales to family expectations, so many of us internalize the belief that joy must be tied to a partnership. And sometimes for some of us, that joy must be tied to having children. And when we find ourselves either alone or without kids or in whatever way, especially later in life, it can feel like something went wrong, even though nothing did. And sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is just appreciate the what was, honor the what is, and stay open to the what might be, even when it's unknown, uncomfortable, or really quiet. It's easy to confuse missing a place, a person, or missing the former version of ourselves. But growth doesn't mean that we forget. It just means that we evolve while still holding space for all the different versions that we've been through and that we've been ourselves. And whether you are partnered, single, divorced, widowed, or somewhere in between, it's okay to want a connection, but it's also okay to stand in your own story exactly as who you are in the right here, right now. Carrie's journey in this episode reminds us that endings don't always have to be tied up with a bow to be beautiful. But I do ask again, the final episode is next week. Is that going to have everything tied up with a bow? Or is it going to leave us hanging and keep us wondering about what is going to happen to Carrie and all these women? So let me know, what did you think of this week's episode? What do you think of next week's finale? Because I want more, and I hope it's more than 28 minutes. I'm eager to see where they take the last episode. And going on this episode's theme of gratitude, I wonder if instead of talking trash about the show, if we can look at it through a lens of gratitude. Now that we know that this for sure was the second to last episode ever, really accept that we got 5 seasons of Sex in the City spanning over decades. We got 2 movies and 3 seasons of And Just Like That. And that's pretty amazing if you ask me, because we don't see that all the time. Also, by the way, the teacher says season finale, but shouldn't it say series finale? HBO, stop playing with my emotions, please. This is very serious stuff. So, for the season/series finale, I was thinking perhaps doing a live, maybe the day after the show to talk about it with you all. What do you think? Let me know if you're interested in that. I've never done it before, but I'm open to trying new things, mistakes and all. Also, be sure to drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you all thought, who you related to the most, and what moments really stuck out to you. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe so that you can follow along with the shorts throughout the week and so that you don't miss next week's finale breakdown, because something tells me that we'll have plenty to unpack. See you then.